We hope that we're going to meet your expectations in this webcast. I'm pretty confident we will. We're going to have an interesting story. By the way, I'm John Metzeler. I am the leader of the Innovation and Digital Transformation Institute of the Conference Board, and I'm going to be your host today. And the story that we're going to tell today is one of how do you get innovation to the market? And of course, we're going to spend ample time on how do you go and overcome those hurdles that you're going to find when you go from conceptualization into commercialization. And we have a very interesting case study, which I'm going to introduce to you in a second. But before I do that, allow me to make sure that you're all set in terms of housekeeping rules. Questions, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So please participate in that. Don't hold back your question. You can go and do that by typing your question into the bottom left box of your screen. And I'll be weaving the questions into the conversation. Maybe not immediately, but I'll try to come back to the question at the next opportune moment. If you want to download the presentation, there's a box for that in the middle, bottom, at the center bottom. Full screen, you can move, you can toggle full screen by the arrows at the top right of your screen. Please, I'm going to remind you at the end, but already now, evaluation. We really value your feedback. We want to get better and better at meeting your needs. So take the 2 minutes that it will take to go and give us that feedback. We would greatly appreciate this. And then last, if you like what you're going to see, the video is going to be available on demand. The webcast is going to be available on demand 24 hours after this live session. So please don't hesitate to hold and to share it with anybody in your company or maybe even beyond. We would appreciate that. You can earn CPE credits. Type your full name and email address in the space provided. Click OK for the 3 pop-ups that occur during the program. Be watchful, therefore. You miss one, you don't get the credit. And then stay online for the entire webcast. And it's only available for you who are participating live, not if you watch it on demand. With that out of the way, I want to introduce Pam Henderson again, who is the CEO of New Edge consulting firm. And Pam has been with us. I trust that some of you will have seen some of the earlier webcasts we've done. I think this is the 6th in the row, Pam, right? And so it's been a pleasure. The previous times, it's a pleasure again to be working with you, Pam. So thank you for joining us. And Pam will also hand it over in due time to our guest speaker today, who is Bob Rodenbeck, and he is innovation lead, is director of research and development of Delta Faucet Company, and he's going to tell the very, very interesting case study on a very cool innovation, by the way. So, yeah, I've talked about me. You don't want to hear more about that. I really want to get us into the subject matter at hand as soon as we can. So, Pam, take it away.
Thank you so much, John. So excited to be here and really appreciate everybody attending. So let me share a little bit about why we're talking today and why in particular I wanted Bob to speak to you all because I think it's very exciting. So as John mentioned, myself and Bob, you'll hear a little bit from both of us. I'm going to start with just a little bit of background. Our company is New Edge, and we have a mission, which is to help companies see, focus, and act. And that's see the full landscape of possibilities by thinking about the future, as well as core opportunities. Focus in on the right vision and strategy because it's sometimes easy to see and not focus, or sometimes too quick to focus and not see. And then act. And we're really passionate about seeing people actually accomplish their goals, have their companies make money, send their kids to college, all that good stuff. So that's our mission. A little bit about us. We were founded in 2002. I have a book about opportunity thinking, which many of you have probably seen. And one of our things that we've done is stay very broad across a number of industries, which has helped us to start to see how industries are converging, coming in and kind of colliding with each other. So that's a big part of what we do is staying broad and working on that. And then also we have a large ecosystem. So we have an ecosystem of over 4,000 subject matter experts. And Bob has been both a client and one of our subject matter experts. So that's been particularly fun. Some of our clients, just a little bit of background on that. We work across a number of industries from food to consumer goods. We've worked in building and construction, in transportation, and in a number of different associations, societies, and also in energy and digital spaces. So I want to talk to you, start out with kind of my big thing that I adore. This is one of my favorite stories ever from history, and it has to do with where the word opportunity came from. Those of you who've been on my webcast before, I think you can probably say this in your sleep, but just in case you need a little practice, here we go. Opportunity, it comes from the word ob portu, and that means into port. Came about in the late 1300s when there was all these new trade routes, and it was actually an age of innovation and convergence of industries, or even birth of industries. And maybe not quite at the same pace we've got, but for those guys it was pretty fast. And they came up with this language around into port, and it literally meant about these boats getting into new ports. And you would think that maybe that had to do with the needs in the market. Now, I used to be a business professor at Carnegie Mellon and taught all kinds of things about market pull and how important that was. And that's because that's where the needs were. And while that is part of opportunity, it's not what they were referring to. Now, you might think then, those of you who are coming out of R&D, that maybe it's about tech push. Maybe it's about the cool things that we can make and the boats we can get them on and get them all over there to the other side of the pond. Again, part of opportunity, not what they were referring to. Turns out what they were referring to was the conditions, the tide and the wind that allowed the boat to make it the final mile into port. Because without the right conditions, those boats would stall. And then everything on the boats would rot or go to waste or become damaged. And so without the right conditions, we can't marry up tech push and market pull. And those conditions have to be both external conditions and internal conditions. And so as I was thinking about this, John had asked me, hey, it'd be really fun if you had, one of your clients come alongside, tell a story. We've done that before, but we thought it'd be fun to kind of spice things up. And I thought, I have to tell you that Bob, and now I'm going to embarrass you, is one of the most courageous innovators I know, and persistent. And so he's going to tell you a story of courage and persistence. But I will also say that the product that came out of this is phenomenal. So we bought one, we put it into our home. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's like something we show off to people, like, hey, you got to come over here and see this. So it's just a really great story from a persistent, courageous innovator who's been pretty shrewd in how he's kind of navigated the conditions, oftentimes internal to his organization, as well as marrying up the market pull and the tech push. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bob and ask that he take over the slides so I don't get ahead of ourselves and give a little bit more of an introduction to himself.
All right. Well, thank you, Pam, and thank you to the conference for this opportunity to speak and tell my story. Mine is a classic story of the challenges associated with bringing innovation product to market and about the impact that innovation can have on a company. A little bit about myself. I do lead the R&D team here at Delta Faucet. I enjoy working at an intersection of technology and innovation. And throughout my career, I've worked in the aerospace, the security, and plumbing industries, all along taking these traditional products that maybe not, kind of old mainstream mechanical, bringing technology into them, helping to make them smart and bring a great, just more consumer value and more functionality along the way. So the Delta Faucet Company, trying to advance. How do I advance?
If you don't make
I'll advance it.
We can help you.
Arrows in the bottom. Okay, I'm going to ask for help here in attendance because I'm having trouble finding that. So, all right. So Delta Faucet was, all right. Thank you. Delta Faucet was established in 1950 by an inventor. This inventor created a new valve mechanism that launched the product, a company that it is today. It is a flagship division held by Masco organization. Today, we're a market leader in the areas of plumbing products with a reputation for innovation, making faucets, shower heads, bathing enclosures, and so on. At the time of this story, Delta Faucet was in very turbulent times and actually facing business model disruption. So there was a lot of executive staff shakeups and a lot of problems with the company trying to find its footing, move its way forward. Right. Next slide. So as we jump in, actually back up one. All right. So I like to start off with one of my favorite quotes in innovation that I thought appropriate for today's webinar. This comes from Kevin Kelly. He was an editor for Fast Times magazine, but wealth flows directly from innovation, not optimization. Wealth is not gained by perfecting the known. This essentially states you have to step out of your comfort zone in order to be really successful and move things forward. This particular graph really supports that first statement. And this graph came out of the Blue Ocean Strategy book, in which they had gone out and surveyed 150 companies to understand their product portfolio and the types of projects they had in the pipeline. As you can see, 14% of the products were new platforms of some nature, and yet that 14% of new platforms generated 61% of the profit. Therefore, you can see from this graph that innovation and developing new platforms really is the way to wealth and success. Now onto the story. My presentation today will take you through the journey I experienced during the development of Touch20 faucet and its predecessor, Pascal, for the Delta Faucet Company. The Pascal and Touch20 were launched in 2006 and 2008 respectively, and used capacitive sensing with a solenoid valve to turn water on and off by touching anywhere in the faucet. So as Pam alluded to, it's a really simple and intuitive interface. You simply dial in the temperature and water to wherever you like it, and then you get that same temperature and flow back by tapping anywhere on the faucet itself. It really helps in terms of economy of motion and control of the water. It's all that in a bag of chips. Touch20 has been a flagship innovation for Delta Faucet for over 10 years and was a game changer as it was the first mass market residential electronic faucet on the market. So it was a game changer back in the day, and it's still something that we hang our hat on in terms of innovation. And every time a consumer gets it for the first time, they are duly impressed and really delighted by the functionality. Additionally, the product itself played a really big role in the turnaround of the Delta Faucet Company in terms of how it helped build the Delta brand and help us move into new and other areas. Okay. So the case study itself takes place in this time period of 2002 to 2009. Delta had been a cash cow for many years by Masco, throwing off a lot of cash and really quite profitable. However, all that time that the brand itself had kind of been mainstreamed, and it was a distant third in terms of brand and sales to our primary competitors. At that time also, we were facing business model disruption due to the rise of low-cost manufacturers offshore, as well as the rise of the big box retailers. And then as the big box retailers started creating their own house brands, our business model was disrupted, and we were in a little bit of a hurt. And in 2002, we brought a new management team that kind of turned things around with the intention of reinvesting into the company, taking some of that funds we had thrown off and putting it back into the business. And among the many initiatives that they created a new R&D team and commissioned some epigraphic research. And epigraphic at that time was a trendy new research methodology that we wanted to try, we'd never used before. In Pam's terms, the internal conditions were ripe for renovation. So we engaged an outside agency to conduct the research, and this agency put video cameras in people's homes, and for a period of time, we would come in and take those cameras back, and we were able to watch families, observe people preparing meals and cleaning up. We saw a lot of very interesting dynamics in the family for the first couple of days until they kind of got used to the cameras, and then they kind of got back to normal. The research came back with a large number of product ideas in addition to these major insights. And although these insights are over 16 years old, the insights are still quite relevant today, and we actually still use them. I'm going to read a couple of these quotes that kind of help drive it. One in the upper left is that user interactions and water control problems are connected and complicated. And then when the faucet was running, I feel guilty about wasting water, but I choose wasting water for convenience. So this kind of talks about the flow of how that goes around the water. Most people are trying to get the job done. And yet, if they're going to conserve water, they have to keep continuously reaching up and turning the faucet handle on and off. And so now if you can find a way where you don't have to do that and it will fit better into the flow, into the workflow, it could be a really big game changer for consumers. So that was the intent. These are some of the early concept sketches that show the opportunities for hands-free and tap control functionality. We did some initial consumer research on these concepts, and as you might expect, the hands-free sensors work quite well. Basically, you put something underneath the faucet, it turns on, we remove it, it turns off automatically. In retrospect, this did well because at that time there were a lot of airport faucets, as people like to refer to them, where you wash your hands, and consumers were relatively familiar with that one. Now, the tap concept down the bottom right was new. A product like this did not exist in the world at that time. And so consumers had trouble visualizing the value proposition of having a tap faucet. So as a result of that, the scores came back kind of marginal. But it was still kind of strong enough, and the team itself felt good enough about it that we wanted to try and make a prototype. So we formed a project team, and the objective was to develop an electronic faucet, deliver on the ethnographic research findings and the concept drawings. There was a great deal of skepticism in the building, and so we actually had trouble recruiting for this project. So the project team was formed and consisted largely of new hires. I was one of those new hires, bringing electronics expertise into the party. And as a small dedicated team, we all wore multiple hats. And over the life of the project, I personally took on the roles of the product engineer, first managing electronics, but also then the project manager, as well as the product manager, because we just found that most people didn't want to be involved in this new and strange thing. And if it didn't fit into the mainstream of product development, most people generally ignored the project until it got closer to launch. And so as a result, this has got a bit of a blessing. As the team was kind of left to their own devices, we were self-directed and allowed us to work with the challenges and decisions with creativity and agility with not a lot of oversight. Really a pretty pleasant thing to work on at the time. All right, so as the team was most new to Delta and the technology was new to Delta, we weren't overly bound to existing processes. This is necessary as most of the work was experimental in nature. We generated a lot of prototypes. We relied heavily on the prototyping. And as you see some of those prototype samples over on the right-hand side, those are pretty, in retrospect, looking back, those projects, probably those concepts and early prototypes nearly killed the project because it just looked so out of the normal mainstream. In our industry, aesthetics are everything. And these products were large and they weren't particularly, pleasant to look at. We were trying to work through the problems of the technology and how to package that technology into the product. I trust you, the products got better looking as we went over time. We relied heavily on home field trials for feedback. And so I actually had one in my particular home. And my poor wife endured many, many iterations of it, some of which were not really improvements at all. But she was great as she provided direct and unfiltered feedback, all throughout the development. I remember one of the quotes that she said when the product was being fussy, she says, I just want to get water. Stop overthinking it. Just give me the water. And so those kind of words kind of resonated. It says, it's got to be simple. It's got to be direct. It can't be overcomplicated. It's got to fit in the workflow where you don't have to think about it. So those are really good insights that my wife was able to pass along. I also knew we had reached a critical tipping point when, of the development up at that particular point. My wife had always been kind of a grudging participant, but she was doing it to support me. But at one point, I had disabled electronic function in the midst of an upgrade. And then she came back after a day and says, I kind of like the electronic thing, that touch feature they were doing. When am I going to get it back? And so at that point, I realized that we had reached a tipping point of consumer acceptance. And I got really, really excited at that particular point in time. Along the way, we had to stand up a new supply chain that didn't always mesh with our mechanical-oriented processes. We had to create electronic infrastructures as well. Also along the way, we kind of always kept doing a lot of demonstrations. So in our building, we bring in a lot of the sales associates and rep channel and distribution reps for training and whatnot. And we always use those opportunities to bring people through the test lab and kind of demonstrate our product. We collected a great deal of content and information along the way, and we can kind of track our progress if we were making improvements as well, and what things started to resonate with the consumer. As we got closer to launch, we actually even did some pilots in showrooms where we would take our product, we did an initial amount of training, we put it in the showroom, and then we sent in mystery shoppers later on to find out how the product was received and how the salespeople were selling it. And with that, we helped to shape then our training programs and our displays and so on. We also had some kind of nice successes along the way in terms of the types of people we got. So at one point, we had Emeril Lagasse, a famous chef in North America. And he offered, one of our reps knew him, and we put that product into Emeril Lagasse's home, and we got some great feedback from a famous chef that kind of helped, again, drive our development times. And then finally, we had a key executive supporter we were able to convert by putting a product in his home. And he happened to have a party that same weekend after we put it in, and he came back on Monday just super excited about it because his wife loved it, and everybody in the party just raved about it. So these were kind of little events along the way that kind of helped build in support for our product throughout its development. This particular slide, I stated earlier here that the concept tests were not strong for touch. And all along the development, we continue to measure the consumer interest in the product. And as you can see, the hands-free slides, the hands-free measurement scored quite well. However, the tap early on, just from the images, did not score well. However, once we made a working prototype and consumers could visualize and really understand how the tap feature would work, the scores went way up. And so this again gave us confidence that we were on the right track. So as we got closer to launch, our internal stakeholders began to get nervous. You know, the product itself didn't look familiar. It had high price points. There were performance and quality concerns. There was a lot of new technology. And in the background, pressure was building on the business, and the new president was announced. The new president was announced to kind of help again turn around the business. In that same time period, an opportunity presented itself to show the Pascal Consumer Electronics Show in the January time period. So we packed up our product. The product team went out there and installed the product in the next-gen home along with Microsoft and other big companies. And Pascal was a huge hit, as it elicited a lot of delight from the consumers, because no one had ever seen anything like this before. And the delight represented itself by people's jaws dropping and you know, eliciting some salty language along the way. Basically, they were just so surprised and delighted by the performance of it and the feature set of it. It was also a major media hit, and we received a lot of national exposure just by being in that one little home, one little site. Unfortunately, the only people that were out there to witness it was our small development team, as well as the PRs and a couple of PR folks that witnessed that interest firsthand. And so we left CES on a high, highly vested in the project and on a mission to launch Pascal. And unfortunately, when we got back into Delta, we learned that the project had been placed on hold due to industrial design concerns by the VP of Marketing. So after the high of CES, the decision to postpone the launch was really, really disappointing. That happened on a Friday afternoon. I went home and kind of, you know, thought about it over the weekend. And I came back with a new attitude. I realized I had nothing to lose at that point in time, because there was no place for me at Delta. I was an electronic engineer. There's really no place for me unless I could get Pascal to market and have it succeed. Therefore, I thought I was playing with house money, and I was going to do everything I had to do to get this product to launch. And then in March, so that happened in February. In March, we had another executive staff shakeup. We had a new VP of Marketing was dismissed, and a new VP of Marketing came in. And along the way, the president decided that we needed something interesting to show at the next Kitchen and Bath Show, which is our major trade show that was happening just 1 month forward. He said we need something interesting, and Pascal was it. So we move into the Kitchen and Bath Show. I was privileged to demonstrate the Pascal during the show. And again, Pascal was a huge hit. It was new and different and something that no one really had ever seen before. But this time it was witnessed by many within Delta. This gave Delta the confidence to move forward and launch the product. And along the way, we got some really great benefits, in that HDTV filmed a segment on the product itself. And they kept showing that clip over and over again, actually building awareness and building interest for the product as it started to move towards launch. So I fast forward a year until April of 2006, where we launched it at KBIS. It was actually built around the focal point of the booth, and it generated huge interest from consumers and sales associates alike. It was a view of the future, and people were just really fascinated by it along the way. So the result of Pascal after we launched it Pascal was essentially a corporate experiment. It was a pilot, and through that pilot, it established consumer interest, and it laid the technical foundation for follow-on electronic products. Additionally, Pascal was a huge PR success in that we received interest and coverage from major mainstream media, such as USA Today and the Wall Street Journal, that we had never really been able to crack before. It was unprecedented. You can see their PR was up over 400% over the previous year. So it really kind of opened people's eyes. So with the success of Pascal, the new VP of Marketing directed that a mass market version be developed for launch. Our plan was to eliminate the hands-free function of Pascal for cost and design freedom, because it drove the industrial design way too much, and also was probably the least reliable piece of technology, and also drove a lot of cost. So we eliminated that particular feature, and we focused exclusively on the capacitive sensing touch sensor itself. That particular sensor was loved by everybody universally, and it was very reliable and repeatable. Along the way, we also developed a technology, developed the technology into a platform that could really adapt it to multiple industrial designs. As I stated, our industry is driven heavily by industrial designs, and we needed to put this product on a lot of different models without having to redesign them all. So that little module is illustrated up on the upper right-hand side. And that particular model can be connected in the plumbing lines via the two pieces on the side, and then some electrical connections to the faucet itself and its battery power. So the package and the platform itself lended itself very readily towards putting it onto a lot of different models, really quite readily. And the last thing that we also did was we improved the installation piece of it. And this was done by a new innovation called, not new, but we replaced copper pipes with PEX lining, and what it does is it helped to isolate the product from the sink itself, which caused a lot of installation-related challenges. So we improved the robustness, we made it much more platformable and reduced the cost, all with the intent of bringing this product into the mainstream, hitting some mass market price points and being able to display in the retail aisle. So I've titled this slide, Innovation is not for the weak. So along the way, the housing bubble burst. This is in the 2007-2008 time period, and Delta sales began to lag. Along the way, we had another new president and another VP of marketing that was brought in. And while Touch20 was under development all this time, but it didn't have a lot of clear consensus within the building. It would be in and it would be out. We had questions about whether we should launch in retail. There were price point challenges. There were POP challenges. Did we do an advertising campaign or not with it? Did we have the right feature set? Is the technology under control? There were a lot of objections to Touch20 as it was outside the mainstream capabilities, and as a result, Touch was removed from the product plan several times and had to survive a number of kill meetings all along the way. All along the way, though, our team, was really great champions, and we kept this product alive and always kept moving it forward, kept solving problems, kept trying to raise the confidence within the organization. Ultimately, the VP of marketing had to step in and made the decision to launch. So fast forward to the next year in November, and we did launch the product in November of 2008. It was launched at the beginning of an economic crisis in the United States, where the housing bubble burst, and there was a lot of challenges associated with that. The product itself had low margins. We were doing a limited distribution and trade only, and it had modest sales projections, and there was no real launch campaign supporting it. However, through all that, the sales were on track, and there was a high degree of interest in the website. Our brand director came looking for a new advertising campaign, and she fell in love with Touch20 because of the website interest and how it scored with consumers. And then as we developed the campaign, there was a decision that we would also launch this in retail at the same time. There was a very significant debate about the pricing of the product, and based on the low margins, there was a concern of if we had to price this to get the margins that we wanted, it would be at a price point that we had never had a product ever survive in aisle for any period of time. At the end of the day, we decided to launch at about a 25% price premium than anything that had ever been within retail. As you can see, we launched the advertising campaign in the June of 2008, June of 2009, and in the first 2 weeks, the sales doubled. The next month, the sales doubled again, and the month after that, the sales doubled again. Ultimately, the sales went to almost 10x the times of our projections of what we originally forecasted. And we also, along the way, had this huge surge of demand, went way up the curve really quickly, as well as huge amounts of website and interest in the product itself. We even had customers calling up, and these are big box customers calling up, requesting to put Touch20 in their showrooms and in their store, as they had so many customers walking in and asking for that particular product by name. This had never happened to us before. Along the way, and based on the strength of the advertising campaign, Touch20 became a social media hit, and it went semi-viral. Again, we had never had the product before with this level of interest, because our industry at that time was a low interest category, and people normally don't get too excited about a faucet. But yet, you can see from some of these quotes that people did get quite excited enough that they would talk about it and spread the word. I won't read the quotes to you, but I love the one in the upper left and the bottom right in terms of, I think one of them says that whoever created this deserves a pay raise and a promotion. So I was very grateful for that particular. You can also see the increases in the overall website traffic and Google searches for Delta Faucet, as it really put Delta on the map for a lot of consumers that really didn't know much and didn't care much about our company. Based on the success of the Touch20 launch and the award-winning ad campaign, the Delta Faucet brand made large gains, not only in brand awareness and brand equities in a short 5-year time period. As you can see, we gained nearly 15 points of unaided brand awareness in a short 5-year time span, picking up 4 or 5 points on a year basis, based almost purely on the strength of the advertising campaign and the strength of the product itself. We closed our gap into our primary competitors, where we were no longer just in third and now at par with our major competitors. It was quite amazing. And then this established Delta Faucet as an innovator once again and reinvigorated our company. We had our customers coming up and our sales associates all of a sudden referring to Delta as the new Delta that was hip and cool and was innovating and bringing new things to market and really shaking up the industry. This ignited a golden age of innovation and even allowed us to expand our brand into category expansions. And these product and innovations are still driving our business today. They're that strong because they were all rooted in great consumer feedback and driven towards satisfying consumer needs. As we look back, I think we did a really nice job in innovating, and not just in the product, but also if you start to look at this in areas of 10 areas of innovation. We focus on these areas well beyond the product. And looking at the 10 areas of innovation, we work on no less than 6 different areas to make Touch20 successful. I can't say that we were smart enough back then to look at the 10 areas and then purposely pick which areas we wanted to go. We more focused on the problems that we thought we needed to solve to help to bring this product to market and help it be successful. So we innovated in areas in the merchandising and the advertising, the consumer experience, training, installation, support, and so on. So we focused on the areas we thought we needed to focus on and help to bring this product to market and help it be successful. Also looking back in terms of what we thought were the keys to innovation success. I'll call it the very first one that the executive support is critical. All along the way and at every key decision point, an executive sponsor rose to the occasion and made the brave call to move forward. In retrospect, the internal conditions were right to take the risk. The company itself was a bit of a burning platform, and so the executives felt they needed to make some changes and to take a risk and to help to move these things forward because they weren't going to get there with the traditional way of things were going. Additionally, to help these executives make the call, we try to keep our risk manageable. And each time and through each little win, we gained some confidence to move forward and trying to keep those risks at a manageable level such that the executives could be brave without risking their career. We also did a really good job, I think, in defining the needs of the use of ethnography. And a result of they connected strongly and emotionally with the consumer, which kind of came through in that consumer delight that Pam kind of referenced earlier in the program. We also did a really good job, I believe, of executing the product and along the lines of always with that vision in mind. We had a really good dedicated team that believed in the product and was on a mission to deliver it. And probably one of the best things is we had a champion that fought for this product all along the way. A little bit of after the story, after we had this big success, our president at the time stated that he wanted a breakthrough product every year. I don't think he really realized what he was asking. I don't think he realized the efforts of the journey that we had to get to that particular one, because it had been a good 5 to 6 year journey to get to that. But with that statement, he actually sent a pretty strong message to the organization, and innovation kind of became the big initiative over the next several years. Innovation became core to our success and a key to competitive advantage. And as such, innovation became driven into all of our product categories and all of our brands. We were so successful at this that a lot of our big customers came to us and with the stating, we have more consumers coming and asking for your products by name and your innovations by name. We like that, and we want our own exclusive innovations. And that actually presented a really big problem. On the surface, it's a really great compliment, but actually the problem we created for us was that we had a great deal of trying to meet that demand. And so now the demand started to outstrip our capacity and ability to do things right, and keeping them small, incubating them before we go to scale. And as a result of that, we had some setbacks along the way. Now, as we fast forward again, we have another new management in place, and this management is now focused on growth, and they're looking to reinvent our innovation group as an engine for growth. And with that, we've developed a long-term vision of the future that which we're going to start applying, getting back to our roots and our cores of innovation and bringing these things to market and being successful. So this is my last slide. I'm going to close my final thoughts in the form of a quote. You can't stop at what you're good at. You have to ask what your consumers need and want, and then no matter how hard it is, you better get good at those things. That's from Jeff Bezos, who's the founder of Amazon. This says you don't define yourself by your capabilities, but rather by what your customer needs are. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Pam, and we'll kind of take any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's such an incredibly inspiring story. A couple of things that really stand out to me is I think a lot of companies are really struggling right now to figure out how to integrate digital and they're trying to figure out how to not only integrate digital experiences, the customer experience, or the smart factory. Those are the places where it might be a little bit more obvious, but how do you integrate it into a product, a physical product? And what Bob did is so intriguing because, as he said, he's a different type of person within that organization in terms of having that digital consumer electronics background, and the ability then to figure out how does that actually play in a product, I think is really key. And it's not always obvious, right? Like, we might look back sometimes at these cases and think, okay, yep, great, it was a touch faucet. It was obviously, by the journey he described, not straightforward. And I just want to mention too that we have to be balancing that tech push, the market pull, and the internal and external conditions. And we worked on a project with Bob that was a smaller project where, Bob, you were just exploring a particular sensor to get certain kinds of information. And after a fairly small project, decided not to go forward with that. And so I think the ability to think in an agile way and to, look at tech push ways to create value and then vet them against the market pull, start with the market pull, figure out the tech push, that ability to toggle back and forth, I think is really key. So I just wanted to mention that this is that Bob's history is not just to, kind of figure it out and go after it and get it right, which is great, but also to vet a lot of ideas quickly and kill the ones that aren't going to deliver value.
So with that nice summary as well, Pam, thank you. And Bob, thank you for that fascinating story. I was considering breaking it up with a few questions. I actually made a whole note of a whole page of points that I wanted to ask, but I decided to let you go and because you were in the flow. But I do have several questions and several points that I would like to go and dig into a bit more. But I'm surprised nobody else has yet submitted any questions. So please let me reinforce my earlier offer to and maybe even push to, if anybody has any thoughts you want to share, an area you want to go deeper into, please do. In the meantime, while I wait for that, let me go and do indeed reinforce what Pam was just saying, which is this is such a fascinating story about the Oporto trinity, right, of needs and technology, and then conditions, and then emphasizing the internal, to me at least, the internal conditions that you have in your company. I mean, I was shocked. I mean, it's very clear the need was there, the technology was there, or at least you were working on it. It was seen to be feasible soon, but there were all the internal conditions that you were struggling with, and frankly a bit of emotions as well. As well at the executive level. At least it's the way you came across. You said at some point executive support. Yeah, but also sometimes executive non-support, right? They needed to be convinced. And so I really want to, any more thoughts on that? I mean, it does feel like, we're actually doing, no, let me ask the question. So any more perspective on that? How indeed, what was the key to go and get that executive support versus that executive resistance? And maybe what would you do differently now that you've lived through that? And what are you going to do better next time even, so that you shrink the time to market, I guess, of your next big innovation?
Yeah, so the challenge always is that the people tend to work within the framework of which they've had success, and so you have this fear of doing something different outside of the norm that really gets in the way. I would say if I were to look back at anything, and there was a lot of executives, there was always an executive maybe that stood forward as like a brave stand, but there were a lot of executives that didn't. And they, you can kind of tell there's a lot of turnover and people that didn't survive very long, and so they were very much consumed with the existing business, what had to happen. If I were to say realistically what needs to happen for this to go forward and be successful without all that executive support and having heroes along the way, is you need to structure your company such that there is a group that's dedicated with that and finds ways to do forward. I'll look at some examples that I know in the USA of people doing this. Like GE has what they call First Build. They've actually carved out a whole business unit where they take these risky projects and they incubate them without disrupting and being bogged down by the mothership brand. Other companies such as Plygem and Whirlpool also do the same types of things, where they have created a whole separate group that their task is to take these new ideas, incubate them, and take these risks without risking the mother brand and letting the mother brand kind of focus on the core business.
But then you still need to make sure that at some point you allow that new innovation to be brought back into the mother brand, right? So you still need executive support in a consistent way.
Yeah. So
once you go and think about seriously about commercialization. So how do you deal with that then?
Yeah. So the thing is, you have to get this incubators and take them to the point where they actually have to launch it. Until you've actually launched it and get the sales, because what I have found is that you can research things to death, bring all this data, and the problem is it doesn't fit within their experience and their database that they have internally. So because it doesn't fit, you have to actually bring out proof that's almost so irrefutable. And so these companies like First Wave and First Build and Plygems, they actually launch it, and then at that point they've actually incubated it, they've actually brought it to commercialization, and they're beginning to scale. And then once you've kind of demonstrated that the product itself is successful within the marketplace, as well as basically the development is done, now you bring it into the mothership organization, allow them to use the full scale and the full distribution to really bring it, really bring scale to it.
Excellent. That's very helpful, Bob. Thank you. And indeed, I heard somebody recently say we should think less about R&D and more about ENS, where ENS stands for experimentation and scale. That's a bit of what you're talking about
absolutely.
Here. Right? Excellent. So in the meantime, we got a few questions. Thanks, folks, for engaging here. So Barry Weinhausen is asking, can you walk through the research you've been doing? I also had the same question. And maybe as you do that, can you get deep in the ethnographic research that you did? And so was that something you typically do? Is that something you started to do? Are you still doing it? It feels like it was a very interesting part of your research, in my view, that really allowed you to get, at some point you called it, into the flow of things. It allowed you to understand how your innovation fitted the flow of consumers' activities. So I was particularly interested in that part of your research. But maybe go through the whole sequence if you don't mind. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Epigraphic was new for us at that particular time. Actually, it was a kind of a new and trendy thing that was being done within the market research world. And essentially, is you go into someone's home and you watch what they do. And the reason you do that is if you bring people in and do a focus group with them and you ask them to describe their process, they will often skip steps, or they don't think it's important, or they they just don't think it's relevant. And so when you get into if you actually watch them as they work within their home, then they're in this flow, in which you're looking for these little hesitations, a little adaptation they might have made, all along the way. That's an indication of a problem to be solved. So I'll give you a couple examples to bring that to life. And so one of the videos we saw someone preparing a meal, and they were happy to be working with some poultry, and their hands were kind of messy from working with the chicken itself. And so rather than grabbing the handle and turning it on to wash their hands, what they actually did is they picked up a wooden spoon and then they went over and they physically opened up the handle with a wooden spoon so they wouldn't cross-contaminate the faucet itself. So that's an example of a workaround. Mm-hmm. Another example is that we saw these. Go ahead.
Please, I said yes.
Another example. Okay. Another example we saw along the way was that they would dial in their ever so right temperature and flow, and they would leave the water running for like 20 or 25 or 30 minutes at a time, because turning the water on and off, while it's easy to do, gets in the workflow challenges. And so those insights that start to say is that, hey, there's a cross-contamination problem that never came up in any of our focus groups stories, oftentimes, and as well as this issue of turning the water on and off. So when we would bring people into our facility to talk about improvements to the product, they would also talk about, I want a faucet that's better, easier to dial in the temperature and flow that I want. It was never this issue of cross-contamination. It was never this issue of a simpler way to turn it on and off. And so that illustration of watching the workflow illustrated that idea, we need a better way to turn the water on and off, not a better valve. And so that's how that whole piece came to play. The other things that ethnographic will bring to bear is these things of emotions and where their mind is at. And so when you do ethnography very well, you get to a very deep level of understanding of what's important to the consumer, and both what they verbalize and both what they don't verbalize. And so it's a very key thing. We end up using ethnography then to do that all across our brands and all across our products, and that's what helped drive a lot of these really strong innovations that we developed back in the day towards that. And so that's been our approach in ethnography. Along the way, we also have added on then new technology as well as trends to augment those pieces. And so we look at ethnographic or consumer insights technology and trends as the key areas of which to get ideas.
And what was your final qualifying test? What did that look like before you pushed the button to start investing in production, I guess? Was that a large-scale test, or?
So we did we actually never, yeah.
Sorry, you did what?
I can't say we actually had a large-scale test. We did a lot of field trials. I think we had probably a field trial of probably close to 100 people that we had put out in the field. It wasn't selling the product, unfortunately, but it was getting out and making sure that the product itself was strong, as well as some like those pilots we put in the showrooms and getting the feedback from folks. But it was largely a leap of faith based on the consumer reactions at trade shows, consumer reactions at the Consumer Electronics Show, as well as the confidence that we had done our due diligence through our field trials.
Excellent. Thank you. That answers that question for the most part. Let's move on to the next one. Beth Ladd is asking, did you have one consistent champion throughout? You did summarize in your summary chart, you put champion in bold with an exclamation mark. I assume that was a key point. So can you speak a bit more to this question?
Yeah, I was that champion.
Okay.
As I kind of described, I was the first one to do the technology piece of it, but I became the project manager and I became the product manager. I cared the most about the product within the organization, and to be frank, I had the most to lose. And so that's why I talked about that playing with the house money. I felt that if I could not get Pascal to launch, there was no place for me, and so I became a very ardent and passionate supporter within the organization to help bring people along.
And you became a winner. If you look at the results that you generate.
I did fare well after it was all said and done, yes.
Congratulations. Bish, sorry, I cannot read that very well. My eyes are getting a bit. Bish, I think Nguyen is asking, can you please share your process to drive your ideas? How did you come up with the idea in the first place?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we get our ideas from using the Epigraphic research. And we also then look at trends and we look at technology for ideas coming in. We generate probably close to 1,000 ideas a year. And with that, you need to find a way to start filtering through the chaff, because there's a lot of there's probably just a few good ideas amongst all the many of the other ideas. And so we use an awful lot of that concept testing where we'll take a sketch of an idea we'll make a problem statement, we'll have a solution to that problem, and a sketch of the idea and a reason to believe in the product, and then we'll take it out and get some consumer feedback based on those ideas in terms of to solve the problem, meets a need, willingness to purchase, and so on, and start to kind of get some guidance about which ideas have some value and which ones we should set aside.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. You mentioned the keys to innovation success. In there, you mentioned the 10 areas of innovation. Can you speak a bit to those ideas and what the background? I guess that's the Deloitte model, right? I'm not sure it is. So
that model is not our model. We borrowed it. We like to borrow a lot of things from people that do best practices, and that Deloitte model of 10 areas of innovation is out there. I think there's a number of articles about it. Generally speaking, when you look at innovations that innovate in more than one area, the more impactful they become. And so in our case, we innovated no less than 6 different areas, a little bit because we had to, but the more areas that you can innovate in, the more successful the product is likely to be.
Yeah, if you're looking at holistic innovation, it's definitely a book. It's a book where you can buy it. And so please, by all means, I would recommend it. It's pretty good with loads of interesting examples in there and some good principles at the end, which you can apply as you guys in Delta obviously have done. Brilliant. By the way, you did make a comment, by the way. You said, listen, we didn't really use the 10 areas of innovation, but you were focused on fixing the problem, first and foremost. And so if you now if you go for, well, maybe you're already doing, right? If you do for your next innovation, are you now applying the 10 areas of innovation, or you're still focusing on fixing the problems, or a bit of both?
We do a bit of both, but I would say as you start to get into really breakthrough products, we do use that model as a point of reference and say, are we have our bases covered, or maybe there's an area that we could pick in or pull in and to help amplify it. So we don't use it for our normal core business, but whenever we start getting into some really substantial and really new breakthrough things, we will pull out that reference and take a look through it and start to say where can we amplify, where do we need to pay attention to, but also how can we amplify our product launch by using these 10 areas.
Excellent. Excellent. Really good. That makes a lot of sense. Hang on, it's hard to read here, Derek. I cannot really read. Let me see here. Rita, sure. Hi, Rita. You're online. Good to hear. Despite being so busy, I know you. Rita asks, who does the processing of the ethnography? Yeah, who does the processing of it? How do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah, so typically we outsource the ethnographic research itself, and so they'll go out and they'll recruit, obviously the homeowners and whatnot, but then they always take the video and they bring it back and they take the videos in and they condense it down for us, and so basically into problem statements. We've probably used 2 or 3 different types of companies over the years helping us to do this. And what we like about it is to get these videos and the problems and the problem statements, and the video kind of illustrates that. And we bring our development team into the room at the same time, and we play these videos to them. And so now you've got a problem. Here's the actual video of the problem being illustrated. And now we can have a really great brainstorming session around how do we solve that problem. So we find it's a very effective tool to generate a lot of ideas around how to satisfy the consumer needs and generate ideas to help bring these products to life.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, we are at the conference board, for everybody to know. We are working on a project that's which we call How Do Leaders Lead and Communicate the Value of Innovation? And there's been a lot of communication needs that you've had externally to some degree, but mostly internal, right? Any input? And you mentioned already a few, but maybe with some more afterthought. Any input in terms of how can you, from your experiences, help us to go and get that research and get the insights in the piece of research?
Could you restate that question? I'm not sure how quite to approach it yet.
How do leaders communicate the value of innovation? I think you've been struggling with that in terms of these conditions, these internal conditions, right? Some leaders were immediately going, "This is great." Sometimes it needed that one leader to have the party, whereas all the guests said, "Wow, this is so cool." Any more guidance you can give us and the audience directly would be appreciated.
Yeah, so I think you need to look at innovation in terms of what it can do for your brand. So you can see the example within our illustration about what innovation did for our brand. But I can also think you can look at innovation and say what it can do for growth itself. And so we look at innovation as part of growth, and allows you to get into areas that you wouldn't normally get into. And when you hit it well, you can see what it did for our company. While Touch20 didn't, while it was a really great product and it did drove a lot of sales, it did so much for our brand and kind of reinvigorated our brand, and then that innovation that was driven all across our other products and product categories. And so I can tell you that from where we were in the 2008 to where we are today, we have had we're at least twice, we're actually more like 2.5 times our size back then. So we've had explosive growth, and innovation was certainly a part of that. It wasn't the only thing that grew that growth, but it certainly had a huge impact in terms of how our brand is viewed by our consumers and our customers, and created a halo effect that really helped us grow and grow dramatically.
So you've certainly been successful in communicating that to your new leadership, to the extent that you mentioned that one of your business leaders now wants a disruptive innovation every year. How have you explained to him that that's not necessarily feasible?
Very carefully. As you know, CEOs like to get what they want, and it took a while to explain to him that innovations like that don't happen very often. In the case of a breakthrough like Touch20, it might be once or twice in a lifetime you get something like that. But you can also get a lot of innovations that drive the day-to-day business. And so it's over a period of time before we recognize that, hey, this took almost 6 or 7 years to happen. And through a lot of heartache and a lot of sweat equity to make that happen. Now, what I will say is that we're trying to go towards a model here at Delta in which we're creating a dedicated group to develop these innovations to bring them to market. And so we think that we're, through that conversation, we're helping to create a structure that's more conducive to innovation and more conducive to breakthrough innovation. So it's a process.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I always say that you need a portfolio of innovation, like you have a portfolio, like you manage a financial portfolio, right? You need a healthy amount of incremental innovation to keep what you have, full of energy and news. adjacent innovation, see what more you can do with what you have, and then indeed focus on the breakthrough innovation as well.
And yeah, you're absolutely right.
Manage the balance and have the leadership own that and support you in that. I think that's the absolute priority, and not always easy.
Absolutely.
I have no more questions. Pam, do you want to any more perspective from your side, your experience? You've been part of this.
Yeah. So I think, Bob, it would be interesting maybe just to talk about what you've been doing recently. Of course, we've been involved in that, but just how you're helping the company think more broadly about the long term. So can you just speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. And a little bit of shout out to Pam, the New Edge organization. And as we were looking for that next level of innovation, how do we get better? How do we always improve along the way? We had an engagement with Pam and her company, New Edge, in which they did an assessment of our innovation processes. And while we had a lot of good pieces in place, one of the things that Pam had mentioned was that we were missing that long-term view of the future around which to align our innovation efforts. And so since then, Pam and her team have helped us develop that long-term view of the future. And so now we have a portfolio that we have been working towards in terms of areas of focus to really focus our innovation efforts towards, such that as we have this 10-year view of the future now, everything we are doing along the way helps to take us towards that 10-year view.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's been interesting on that because part of the magic of what you're doing is you're still building alignment in really smart ways. Is you've got a very diverse and cross-functional group that's been through that process. So I think you're constantly intuitively building the seeds of adoption of the innovations by driving that cross-functionality. So, kudos to you and the team for thinking that way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit of a journey. Yeah.
I totally agree, but I see you smiling. That's great. After so many years of hard work. Hey, you have definitely demonstrated your chart on how meaningful innovation drives wealth. Beautiful illustration. And the wealth also is not only financial, right? But it comes across through in the reputation of the brand, and all sorts of benefits that it offers at the consumer level, which then feeds back in terms of how your brand is being seen. And frankly, Delta is not. I'm not even sure if you have a business in Europe. Where I am, I'm in Brussels right now. You guys are in the US. I must say that the story has even reached Europe. I was reading an article in a European magazine about this innovation. So it definitely, all what you've done is making a huge impact. By the way, last thought, I think you guys should be writing a case about this together. And I'm going to use it with my students for sure once you're done. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Pam, for bringing this webcast and introducing it and helping to moderate it. Thank you, Bob, for your very inspiring story and great lessons. Thank you to the audience for having joined us. I hope indeed the investment was worth your while, was proved worth your while. Please take a few minutes to go and give us your feedback. Again, it's a very short questionnaire. Love to learn and see what you thought, and also what else you would like to get us into. Also, Rita Shore, who I mentioned before, and I are co-leading, as I mentioned at the start, the Innovation and Productivity. That used to be the name, the Innovation and Digital Transformation Institute. And please, if you go on the Conference Board website, you want to learn more. There's tons of interesting perspective. We also, if you want to dig more deeply into innovation and digital transformation, there's councils that you can register. We're one of our flagship, I guess the flagship product of the Conference Board. We have councils in those fields as well as in many other fields, both in the US and in Europe. If there's any interest in, say, the Innovation Council, you can join in either geography or the Customer Experience Councils that we have. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thank you very much again for your attention. We're right smack on the dot on the hour. I hope to see you again at one of our next webcasts or other opportunities. Thanks. Bye-bye.